Made it to Florida. This is at a community garden here, not too far from FAMU. You can see how they're doing here with plenty of mulch, plenty of material. Small scale tractor farming, composting. Look at all these greens, how everything's looking so beautiful. Time zones and growing zones, sometimes they coincide. Sometimes you can be in the same time zone and in a completely different climate zone. Orchard trees, community plots. Composting. I think this is moringa here. Don't that look like moringa?
His wife, he found Grow Where You Are, and there's an excellent book he has on the table that you probably already heard of that speaks to his growing principles. A program that transforms urban spaces and underserved neighborhoods.
I'm taking an intermission here. It's break time. That's Big Brother Densu, the professor that brought me here. We got it happening.
Okay, good people. So, the first part of the talk. What did you hear that was helpful, that opened some thoughts and some ideas in your mind? Anything that stuck from the first part of the conversation?
So I was thinking about fixing in my garden so the animals wouldn't get to it. And now I'm like, oh, might need to keep a portion open. So
Interesting. Okay. So she's talking about the fencing to protect the garden, but also maybe wanting certain animals to move through the garden. We'll talk about that. Leaves.
I have all these leaves. I got all these huge trees in my backyard. So they got a lot of leaves. And I told him I wanted to get rid of leaves. He said what I do is when I mow it, he said I'm gonna mulch it for you.
That's a good practice.
And actually he's been putting them around the trees is what he's been doing.
Mulching your own leaves with a lawnmower. Very simple, something to do. You can put a lawnmower up on some cinder blocks, turn it on, and in fall and just rake leaves up under it. And it'll just take care of them. Anything else that struck that you remembered? You got something?
Just how you incorporated ecological principles and combined it with agriculture. I really appreciate the stuff. I like that.
Okay, wonderful. A reason I'm doing a little bit of a recap is because we have a new person with her children here, and I think she has some experience growing, so we want to make sure that we kind of bring her up to speed. It's been a kind of an informal chat, but we're about to get more formal now that we got the slideshow. So this gentleman's face, Pierre Rabhi, this is somebody you got to know, Pierre Rabhi. He is the one who coined the term agroecology. A lot of the times, the people who are doing this work that look like us or come from a similar background as us, you're not going to hear about. So years and years ago, I saw this movie called Dirt. Has anybody ever seen the movie Dirt? Take a look at that movie. And in that movie, it was a film that came out, oh man, it must be about 10 years ago now. And it was as this movement for local food and urban farming started to gather steam. And they started to want to educate people about the soil. So this movie has a lot of graphics and it's good for children and it talks about dirt. And they interview all types of people. They interview all types of farmers, celebrities, wine growers talking about dirt. And in there was about 2 minutes, I don't even know if it was that long, about 2 minutes where they talk about Pierre Rabhi. And they show him in Africa moving a wheelbarrow around and all this. They never let him speak. He only speaks French. But you never hear him speak in the movie. And they just barely talk about him. Oh, Pierre Rabhi, he did this, da, da, da. And then that was it. And I watched that movie. I said, who is that? And I started digging and saying, who is this person? I need to find out who this person is. And I did some research, found out who he was. He has a book that is in the back of this. I have suggested readings in the back of my book. The top book on there is As in the Earth, so as in the heart, so in the earth. That's the only book of his that's in English. and it talks about agroecology, and it talks about why not to use the chemicals. Wangari Maathai. Who's familiar with Wangari Maathai? Oh,
Oh,
Lord.
yeah, she's the one from Kenya. Who
She
planted
is
all
the one from
trees.
Kenya.
Oh.
Absolutely. The Greenbelt movement. So there's a QR code. You can scan that if you like and you want to get some more information. She's one of, I think, the first African woman to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize. She said, most of us, we want gold, we want silver, we want rubies, we want diamonds. These are all just rare, refined soil. Rubies, diamonds, where does it come from? You don't pull them out of the tree. You don't bring them down from Mars. You go into the soil to get them. So that's how important the soil is everything that you already want ain't nothing but soil anyway. Money, there's only one real form of money, and that's gold and silver, precious metal. That comes from the soil. That comes from the earth. It is the earth. She is known for her movement, the Greenbelt movement. She got her degree in a European country. And then she got her degree, I think, in science of some sort. She came back to her village, and when she came back to her village, when she went to go get water, where she always got water, there was no water in that creek or riverbed stream. For years, what happened? They cut down all the trees. Once they cut down all the trees, the water went away. Why did the water go away when the trees got cut down?
They hold it in. I mean, it's a cycle. If there's no trees putting it back out, how does it keep going?
Putting what back out?
Water.
Right. So the trees are breathing. What do we inhale from the tree? Oxygen. And what else is the tree giving out? Water. When you breathe on a piece of glass, you see water? Right. The tree exhales water as well. Water is the piece of the cycle that always moves through. It also drops the temperature. Water drops trees drop the temperature in an area. So if there's a hot asphalt and then there's a storm going over and there's hot asphalt, the storm keeps moving. And then it gets to an area where it's lush and green and the temperature drops. Right when the temperature drops, that storm that's above you, everything cools and it falls. So if you don't have no trees, you're not going to call no rain. So she looked out at the hills and she said, well, dang, the hills are naked. We need to put a belt around it. We need to put a belt around the mountain. So they started planting trees around it. She said the hills are not dressed. There's no hat, there's no belt, and there's no shoes. So we need to put clothing on the mountainside to bring back the water. That's Wangari Maathai. You know, you should do some research on this. They are one of the first organizations to do a declaration, a legal declaration of agroecology. So this is, yeah, we're home growers, but you're also now becoming a member of a unified movement on the planet of people who've been growing food and have decided the way we're growing food is just killing everything. So we need to do it differently. So what you're doing in your backyard is in alignment with that. Let's see if there's any of these interesting questions. Who goes to market? Who is doing online learning? Who's doing online learning? Who's watching anything online about farming and agroecology and gardening? Can you say who you're watching or what you're watching? What channels?
Tallahassee Food, the market thing, they have some Tallahassee Farmer Network program that they got funded for. And they have seminars on YouTube.
Yep. What are you looking at?
Georgia Organics and partnerships with them, as well as YouTube, of course, and peer-reviewed journals, and then the studies that they show attached to it.
Wonderful. What you looking at, Malcolm?
I look at a lot of stuff on YouTube. Farming in Africa and stuff like that. I watch a lot of that type of thing.
Good, good. That's going to be helpful because when you look at what's happening internationally, you're going to find people who are working with a lot less resources than us typically. So the ideas that they come up with are totally different because if you can't just run to Home Depot, then your mind changes. You know what I mean? There's an organization called Food First. Anybody familiar with Food First? Food First is an organization that they were doing food sovereignty tours, and they would take people to Cuba. And we sent 2 of our representatives to Cuba with them back in 2016 or so. And they said when they got to Cuba, the Cubans told them, why don't y'all have anything growing in America? He said, everybody in America should be growing. He said, you can go to Home Depot and get everything you need. He said, whereas here, we're driving around in 1957 Chevys. You know what I mean? Because we have to rebuild everything. Why do they have to keep rebuilding everything? That's right, because they can't get no new parts, no new cars, no new machinery, none of that. So their mind is different. All right, so here, broken traditions, disconnected generations. This is the important thing. If we as the people who built the agricultural system in America had not been terrorized off the land, then not only would we be further along, but America as a whole agriculturally would be 150 years further along. Right now, most of the people in other countries are familiar with the things that we're now trying to understand, like saving seeds, harvesting rainwater, planting trees. All of these things, many other countries, especially any of the global south, anybody under the equator, they know about all of this, right? It's us that are trying to figure this out. And we're trying to figure it out while we're paying mortgages. You know what I mean? Why would you even have a mortgage if you don't grow food? Access to land is critical. Access to the skills is critical. So how do we pass this on? How does it, more importantly, how did we get disconnected? What happened to make it to where we stopped growing food?
Racism, disenfranchisement, people stealing your land from under you, intimidation.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So then you got to know about this. Everybody who's on Instagram, start following Acres of Ancestors. This is a legal movement where they're getting together resources and access to resources for black farmers and landowners who've had their land stolen or it's at risk of being stolen. So this tells a little bit more about the work that they do. Again, you'll have this slideshow so you'll be able to dig deeper in it. All right, we can move. Okay, let's stop here for a second. Name something that you can recognize in that picture as food.
Figs.
Okay. Somebody said it. So figs. Okay, figs. So there's figs down here. This is cactus fruit. This is something called toothache plant. It's called spilanthes. Spilanthes. That plant, if you eat it, it will numb your entire mouth. Toothache medicine. It comes from the Amazon. My background, we talked about that. If you have any questions about my background, you can pop them up at any given moment. Let's go to the next one. All right, now, this is where it gets good. We're talking about the soil health, right? If you scan that QR code, that'll take you to a video of ours on YouTube where we're making compost. What was it in that slide that you reacted to, Erica?
The whole part about the slaughterhouse and the byproducts of it that people aren't even aware of.
When Dentu gave the introduction for me, he talked about me doing veganic agriculture. And what that means, it doesn't mean that we don't use manures and all that kind of stuff. It means that right now, around America, at the slaughterhouses, at the end of the day, they take everything that's left over and they just squeegee it into a big pit. And once they squeegee it into that big pit, they grind it up, then they dehydrate it, and then they sell it to organic farmers. Because organic farmers are allowed to put bone meal, feather meal, blood meal on their land. Now, whether you think that's good or bad, I'm not here to debate that. What I'm saying is this: if these slaughterhouses don't have a place to sell that waste, what happens to it? If the slaughterhouses can't sell their blood, their bones, and all the ground up parts to farmers as fertilizer, what would happen to it?
Chicken processing plant, they take everything from, I mentioned the farmhouse, they take it, every part, and like you said, all the offal, they call it offal, and they send it to the rendering plant, and the rendering plant turns it into dog food and cat food.
And then what else happens to it? What happens to all the urine and the feces?
Oh, does it end up in the watershed from just sitting there or going in the pools?
They have those big lagoons, right? And those things will catch on fire.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So then they'll just periodically spray it out into the community. So there's many communities in the southeast where we are, where the slaughterhouses are kind of mandated to be in our communities. And people got that spray going on in their house. They got to close their windows and stuff during the summertime because they're just off spraying all this stuff. So when we're looking at how can we generate soil fertility without having to use these things, not only because of where they come from, but because you have to buy them. You see what I mean? So we're looking at, when you look around here, what is usable here as fertilizer and compost? Everything. Everything. So if you have some green material, you got your nitrogen. If you have brown material, you got your carbon. If you activate it with microorganisms, you got heat. If you put water on it, the whole system will keep on going. So what we want to do is we want to continue to grow things that grow fast. Some of your compost crops are comfrey, mullein, sunflowers, lemongrass, sorghum. You want to grow things that grow fast and then just chop them down and put them back in your compost. Yes, sir.
Sorghum, what is it? It's like a seaweed or something?
Sorghum is actually, no, it's a grain. So it grows tall like corn. The grain shows up on the top. The stalk can be juiced for sweetness. They used to make sorghum syrup. Some people still do. We've been selling sorghum now at the market, sorghum juice now at the market for about 4 years. So we'll grow rows of it, chop the grain off on the top, take the stalks and run it through like a sugarcane juicer and get juice off it. Yeah, and it grows real fast with no water.
Would you put sugarcane in that category as well, or no?
You could do, but sugarcane's not as easy to compost because it's much more sturdy and yeah. You want things like even papayas. If I was y'all, I'd be growing papayas out here just for compost. You know what I mean?
Now with the sunflower, my question is, because it's allelopathic at times with other things, do I be mindful where we plant the sunflower?
Yeah, borders.
Okay.
Borders around for sunflowers or anywhere where you're trying to attract pollinators. All right. This is a spot called Grow Biointensive in Kenya. And when I got there, they did a situation where they grew 30% of the crops they grew just for the soil. But this is at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. The land is pretty desolate. And if you're going into business, the best people to learn business from are Africans. Because when we got there, we had scheduled a meeting. You know, I came from all the way from the United States, went to go meet him. He showed up, and there was a big building in the beginning of the farm. And he took us in that building. And in that building was all these different things that different people in the community had made. Clothes and wallets and all types of stuff. And we're in there and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking and we're talking. And he's telling me all about the farm, but I haven't seen the farm yet. We're inside this building. You know what I mean? And I said, man, I wonder when I'm going to get to see the farm. And he keeps showing me stuff. Right? What did he want me to do? Buy something.
Yeah.
Don't come up in here all the way from the United States and think I'm going to give you a farm tour.
Yeah.
Buy something in here. Once I bought a couple wallets and a couple belts, and then he said, come on, let's go see the farm. You see what I'm saying? So most people are not making their money off of the food. You're making your money off of something else. I can earn more teaching than I can growing food, right? But nobody's gonna listen to you teach if you haven't grown the food. Because at some point people start to get smart and go, man, this person doesn't actually know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? So what I noticed when I was in Kenya was how things were being done. This is how they're starting their seeds. They just had wooden boxes, they put in the soil, they cut a line, started their seeds. They didn't have all the, I see seed trays and stuff over here that's just laying around. We got enough stuff in America to start a farm on every corner. What keeps us from starting the farms?
Sweat equity.
Mindset.
You put those together. That's it. Sweat. People start sweating, they itch, they don't, oh, wait a minute. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too dry. I'm uncomfortable. We're already uncomfortable. Nothing makes you more uncomfortable than being sick. So, mindset. If it's too hot for you, then farm from 6 in the morning till 10 and then go back out from 4 to 7. This shouldn't be a torturous thing. You ain't got to be out from noon to 3 when it's don't do that to yourself. When I was in California, we were starting at a public school was where I got my start. And because it was a public school, we had to sneak on the campus. And that's when I learned from my teacher that night gardening is the best type of gardening. Garden at night, especially on like right now the moon is waxing. For these next 14 days, you're gonna get more and more light. You ever been out on the full moon night? You can walk around like it's daytime.
Yeah.
Do all your farming at night. Do it on full moons, on waxing moons. You come out there and you put your water out. You do everything you would normally do. Just do it in the evening. Do your paperwork during the day. Pack your produce during the day. Deal with your machines during the day. And then gets about 6 o'clock, say, hey, I'm gonna do from 6 to 10. Change of mindset. Okay, soil building techniques. Take a look at those techniques and see what on there is news to you. Okay, we have, you had talked about this tarping for the weed killing, right? Broad forking, that's it. Let's talk about that. Anybody know of a broad fork? All right, for those of you who are gonna be home gardening, this is, and even at your size, do get a broad fork. Because the broad fork it's human powered. You don't have to use a tiller. It's great for young men. It's a big forked implement. It typically has about 6 forks in it. About 18 inches long are the forks, maybe even 2 feet sometimes. And you stand on it. You get it into the ground, then you pull back on it, and it flips the soil up. It doesn't flip it all the way over. It doesn't grind up the earthworm. It just adds air into it. So the broad fork, instead of tilling, if you're gonna have semi-permanent beds, just broad fork them a couple times a year. You know what I mean? Then add your compost right on top of that. Matter, keeping all organic matter on your site. When you clean out your beds, that ain't nothing needs to go in the trash. Nothing needs to go in the trash. If it's weeds and you're like, oh, I don't want these weed seeds to spread, what can you do with it?
Let it die. Put it in the sun and let it die.
You can put it in the spot and let it die. You can burn it. Or you can put it in a compost that you know is going to get over 140 degrees or 120 degrees for a couple days. You can speed up your compost and heat up your compost by adding in molasses, right? Because the microorganisms thrive on sugar. You can take a 5-gallon bucket, get some pantyhose, put a bunch of bananas and banana peels and everything inside those pantyhose. Tie it, put it in that 5-gallon bucket. Fill that 5-gallon bucket full of water. Put a cup of molasses in there. Stir it around. Leave it in there for about 2 or 3 days. Keep stirring it every couple days. You take that, pour it on your compost, or just spray it on the foliage of your plant. Spray it down on the roots. Everything starts to get turned on because of the sugars. So sugar is a key to activate and heat up your compost. You want to have your green, your brown, your sugar. Some of this will tell you the breakdowns of your compost. And when you're pruning your fruit trees, all that stuff that you prune, you can rent a chipper and chip all that stuff. Chip all those limbs, chip all of that stuff. Keep all your organic matter on site. And when you're starting a new compost pile, go dig out from under one of your trees so you have native indigenous microorganisms. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just put that in every compost pile so that you get some of what's already here. That's that's a suburban garden in Atlanta. And thank God for what is that?
Drones.
No, yeah, drones. Google Earth. Google Earth. If you want to look at your site, type in your address on Google Earth. And it'll take a picture every couple years, and you get a chance to just get these pictures for free. They're already watching you anyway. So you might as well use some of their stuff. I don't have the technology to do that. So birds, fish, earthworms, insects, all of that are animals that need to be moving through your environment. And it's important because that way you can get their manures and their droppings without having to be a part of systems that you don't want to be a part of, right? To get birds in your space, you want to have trellises. You want to have things that they can land on. Places where they can be up high, perches and things like that. That'll help that. Earthworms. Who's growing earthworms? Anybody growing earthworms? All right, you got to start. Yep, talk to me. You doing it?
Yeah, where mushrooms are, I can like earthworms and I like populate them so I can put in my like plants.
There you go. So keep it dark, keep it moist, add in your vegetable scraps from inside the house and feed them that way. Yeah, again, that QR code will take you to a link. All right, so this is just more examples of the sites. When you're designing your garden spaces, what are the key things that you want to think about for the way humans move through the space? What are the things you need to think about when you're designing a garden or a farm for human movement in the space?
Circulation.
What do you mean circulation?
Like how you walk, or be able to fit through, or be able to reach.
All of those. Okay, so she said a couple different things. Being able to reach is basically about how wide to make your bed. Just because you got a big spot, you don't want to make a bed 5 feet wide, right? You want to think about, can you get to both sides of that bed? If you can get to both sides of that bed, then maybe 4 feet wide. But think about making it for you. Everybody don't have the same reach. You know what I mean? She hit me up on Instagram and said, I'm looking for somebody to do my garden. And I said, no way. So she left her number and I called her. I said, is this the real Layla Ali? She said, this is the real Layla Ali. I said, okay, cool. She had just moved to Georgia from California. So she said, come out, look at my spot. I want you to do my garden. My business is not doing home gardens. I'm past that. I did that years ago. But when Layla Ali called you, you like, oh,
Let me get back into this home.
maybe I'll do a home garden. You know what I mean? So we get out there and we set up the garden. She didn't know anything about gardening. And she said, I want to set up this garden. She's very astute, politically minded. Her husband, Curtis, is also very smart. They know about food. They're both professional athletes. They said, we can't trust any of this food. Cool. So we set it up. And we did cedar. So if you're going to do a long-term box bed situation, you want to use cedar wood or redwood so the water doesn't rot it. So we set it up. It was about this high. She's tall. She's probably 5'10" maybe. And she said, Eugene, I've been boxing all my life. She said, I'm not trying to bend down and get into these low boxes. I need some higher boxes. I said, well, that's cool, but this is cedar wood. And this was right during the pandemic. To raise her boxes up to where she was comfortable was $6,000 just for the wood.
Yeah.
Just for the wood. But now, because she got it the way she wants it, she's in there using it. This is the same for your design. If you set up a space that you're not going to use, you might as well have a lawn. You might as well just go back to grass. You need to set up a space that you're going to want to use and the people in your family are going to want to use. There needs to be spaces that are shady where you can sit down and relax. There needs to be a wash station where you can wash stuff. There needs to be a place where tools go that are power tools and mechanical tools, and then another place where hand tools go, so that when someone comes into your space, it's clear for them where everything is, how I can get to it, and where can I sit down. Are you going to be moving through here just as one person? Or are you going to be moving through here with a wheelbarrow? You don't want these tight corners. You want everything to have, if you look at our sites, it's a whole lot of roundness going on, right? It's a whole lot of roundness going on. You want things to be smooth. And there are places where you need straight lines. You just got to think about where that is. There's going to be places where you don't need rows at all, where you're just going to broadcast stuff out. Cover crops. You can do all kinds of things with wildflowers. You got to have your buffer zones, privacy zones, especially living in urban areas, right? You may have a situation where, man, I don't like these neighbors. You don't like them neighbors? What you going to plant? Banana? Cactus? Roses? You see what I mean? Natal plum. Y'all know natal plum? Natal plum has thorns on it like that. You got an area where you don't like people coming through your yard. Maybe it's a place where people hop fences. You put natal plum on there. You put roses on there. You see what I mean? So you ain't got to be out there talking about, get out of my yard. Don't worry about that. Hop the fence. Come on. Protection, privacy, functionality. These are how you think about your design in your space. If there might be crops that you're growing that you don't want people to know you're growing. Things you're going to want to do when you design your spot. You're starting with what? What's your first thing in your garden design?
Trees.
Thank you. What kind of trees? Hardwood, nuts, and then
Shrub. Stone fruit.
fruits, stone fruits, and then shrubs, right? Pomegranates, blueberries, raspberries, goji berries. We good? Skeleton of the system is the trees. Let's go to the next one. All right, resources. There's some resources there. Anybody have that Farming While Black book? Oh, everyone get that book. That book is almost as thick as one of these boxes. There's a sister named Leah Pennyman. She has a farm in New York, Soulfire Farm.
Yeah.
Soulfire Farm. They're doing this Farming While Black book has how to. It has history and context. It has recipes for canning and jarring, all types of stuff. Other resources on here. Anybody familiar with any of these? Dr. Kwaku Ando, Biblical Mana. You familiar with that? Dr. Ando taught me. He's an ethnobotanist from Ghana. And he told me that persimmons follow black people all over the earth. So persimmon is a fruit that black people need to be eating. He said persimmons follow black people everywhere. That's why if you go to China, there's all these persimmons.
Yeah.
Because that's where one of the places where we started.
Yeah.
Right? That's Dr. Ando. Who do we got here? Adonijah, that's my teacher. Pierre Robbie, we talked about. Dr. Amen, if you're on Instagram. Dr. Farmer Brother. Dr. Amen is in Virginia. Is that right? I think he's
right.
Dr. Amen. Everybody needs to be following him. Dr. Farmer Brother is his tag. This brother. So this is a case of somebody utilizing their position in an extraordinary way. He's at a university. He don't own his farm. He's on university land. He's doing university research and just knocking it out of the park, growing rice, growing all types of stuff. Who else is good? Habasha. If you're going to Ghana, check out Habasha Inc. Charles Dowding is very interesting. Will Allen of Growing Power. Now this is interesting. Anybody familiar with Growing Power in Milwaukee? A brother named Will Allen was a basketball player. And after having a basketball career, he went back to Milwaukee and he started an organization called Growing Power. And Growing Power was an organization that grew food in Milwaukee. Because it's so cold, they were growing everything indoors under tunnels. And growing with worms, growing with fish, growing with all types of stuff. Will Allen was the one who helped Michelle Obama do the garden at the White House.
Okay.
Yeah, Will Allen's no joke, no joke. If you go online and now and you type in Will Allen Growing Power, nothing comes up. A couple of years ago, they shut the whole thing down. Difference between a nonprofit and a business. I don't advocate for one or the other. I advocate for both. Truly Living Well, that's if you come to Atlanta, you can see that. Abra Lee, yeah, that's a good one. Navdanya Institute, Dr. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Vandana Shiva is a quantum physics PhD who started dealing in the agricultural world. And Dr. Shiva has an institute, Navdanya, which means 9 seeds. Because the belief in India is that there are seeds that are associated with different planets.
Yes.
There are key seeds that need to be grown that are associated with different planets. So the Navdanya Institute is about saving seeds. So if you're growing food in your space, have an area that is just about seed production. Right? So if I was growing collard greens and I wanted to save the seed, what do I have to do?
Let them go to seed. Wait for it to dry out on the plant. Let them make sure they're dry, put them in a paper bag, label them.
Okay. If I want to save the seed from sunflowers, what do I do?
Make sure they're pollinated.
Fruit. How would you do plums? You can graft a plum, and that way you don't have to save the seed. Right? You can take a piece of a cutting of it and then graft it onto another rootstock, and that way you can reproduce it more and more and more and more and more. Because sometimes those seeds may or may not give the same thing. Because a lot of fruits are hybrids. Same with tomatoes. A lot of these things are hybrids. So what that means is they took 2 different, it's not genetic modification. It's 2 different plants in the same family. Maybe one was good for flavor and one was good for size, right? And then they hybridize them, pollinate them, you get a fruit. But it's like a donkey and a mule, right? Can a mule have babies? No. Can a donkey have babies? Yes. Because a mule is a donkey and a horse that they make. So a mule is sterile. So a hybrid may not be sterile, but you might get either the mother or the father plant. You won't get the thing that you have there. If you got a nice juicy tomato that came from one big tomato and one tomato that's juicy, and you plant that seed, you're either going to get the big tomato or the juicy tomato. You're either going to get the mother or the father. So it's best when it comes to these fruit trees to graft them, to cut them, and then you know you got what you got. Let's go back to the beginning, because there was stuff that we didn't cover in the beginning. And okay, go back to that chinampas, right there. All right, chinampas. Anybody familiar with chinampas? I know Dinsu is. Okay, good. Chinampas is a agricultural system in Mexico that is still existing in Mexico City today, where they have been growing in the same area for 500 years. So when people tell you you got to let the ground go fallow after every 7 years and all that kind of stuff, it all depends on what you're doing. The chinampas are completely, they were called the floating gardens. They're completely submerged. So what I'm saying is they dug out these canals, brought the dirt from those canals and piled it up in the center, and then planted up there. So there's water running completely through these systems. If you take that link, that'll take you to a video about the chinampas. And then every year they dig out that and put it back on top. And there's fish in those canals. So the fish are leaving their waste, everything is happening, and they keep on just adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And they're still growing food in those systems today. But what do you see that's holding them together? The trees. None of these systems that we're talking about are gonna work if you think you're gonna eliminate the trees. That's why America is in the situation we're in. Because the colonizer, when they came here, they saw all this beautiful land. It was already being managed. An indigenous people's history of the United States. Have y'all read this? It's online. You can get it as an audio. Indigenous people's history of the United States. And they talk about how when the colonizer came here, they saw in the southeast forests. Forests where the space between the trees was wide enough for you to ride a carriage through it at full speed and not run into a tree. Was that naturally happening? No, someone was managing those forests. We had been managing the forest. But when the colonizer came, they didn't understand it because they didn't have that in Europe, so they had never seen that before. So they said, well, we want to grow stuff. And they came through and chopped all the trees down. Bro, let's just do 5,000 acres. We'll just take down all the trees, 5,000 acres. Now those trees got animals in them. Those trees got insects in them. One oak tree got how many thousands of gallons of water in it? Think about a tree. How many gallons of water is just in a small tree like that? That thing doesn't stand up because it has a skeleton. It stands up because it's full of water. So that thing is circulating all that water. You got birds living in the top of it, worms and fungi living underneath it, and all types of stuff are living inside of it. You cut down that tree and you do it for 5,000 acres. You'll maybe get 2 or 3 seasons of food, and then you get famine, you get a dust bowl, you need fertilizer. That means Alzheimer's, autism. It means all of these things that now came because people wanted a place where a tractor could move easily. You see, when we're prioritizing the tractor, then that's the thing that's going to be healthy. Right? So the tractor runs fine. Because now you made it like flat and empty. Yep.
I in recent years have been really fascinated by fungi and the fact that they are like the information highway for plants. And I was reading or listening to something that was talking about how when trees are dying naturally, it's almost like they download the information that they hold to the plants and other trees in the area. But when they're cut down, they don't have the chance to either share or hold the information.
And they're also traumatized.
Mm.
They're traumatized. It's a traumatic experience. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Well, I'm just wondering what your experience or thoughts are on how that goes into some of the, I don't know, above the ground things that we're talking about relative, or more than just how they hold the soil. And,
yeah, no, you got to. You're saying something really good. So I'm going to talk to y'all about this. If you can, pick this book up, Sensitive Chaos, right? Because this book talks about the patterns of water in everything, in your muscles, in the grain of a tree, the patterns of water everywhere. What it speaks about is how the air moves differently above a space based on what's growing on the ground. A grassland at night is going to start to release and be cooler, right? So then the air above it changes at night, right? If you have a desert at night, it changes because of the moisture that it does or does not hold. So the air above everything is being affected by what we're growing on the ground. So when we come through and we get rid of a bunch of trees in an area, yeah, it disturbs that immediate environment, but it also drastically changes the temperature of the whole area. I was working at a place called Trees Atlanta years and years ago, and their whole thing was to plant trees all through the area, through the urban area, to reduce something called the urban heat island. A heat island in an urban area is the heat that is generated from the roof of people's buildings and houses and the streets. Right? So what happens is these urban areas, wherever there are not trees and there's a lot of exposed roofs and a lot of exposed streets, the temperature is about 4 to 8 degrees hotter than any place that just has grass. And if that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, what is happening in Atlanta is the storms that come up from the south, they come towards Atlanta. Right when they get towards Atlanta, it gets too hot. So the storm either goes under it or over it, and no rain will happen in Atlanta. Because of the heat island. It's literally hot air that's pushing everything away. Does that make sense? You can do the same thing on a farm. You can start to push the rain that you want away by cutting away stuff, and you can do the reverse. If you know you're not going to use an area, plant it up with some grasses. Plant it up with some wildflowers. Plant it up with something that keeps it cool. Don't have exposed soil. Remember what Wangari said. Put some clothes on. Water system. These are ancient water systems. If something is created correctly, there's no reason for you not to have prolonged use of it. If you go to Machu Picchu, the water is running through Machu Picchu right now. If you go to the Chinampas in Mexico, those people are still farming and riding their boats through there. Like, the Great Wall of China doesn't have to be rebuilt. You don't have to rebuild that every year. If something is built properly, then there's no reason for it not to be useful. So if we are now in 2023, all of us as urban and suburban people trying to think about food, that means something went way wrong. Because we can go up the street and the store's got food in it. So why are you even here learning this? Most of us are drawn here. When I talked with Jennifer Taylor, I said, why would I come? Who would come and listen? I said, what is happening? She said, I'm talking to the small farmers. And I said, well, ain't no farmer want to hear from me. I don't run a farm like with tractors and stuff. And she said, yeah, but you know why they're listening? Because they're sick. Because they're sick. My grandparents had 80 acres in Kansas, right? And it was being grown corn, soy, and wheat. It was growing commodity crops. But at their house, across the street from their 80 acres, at their home, they had a garden that had everything that they ate. Their pigs, their chickens, their ducks, all their vegetables, they grew that. Nowadays, people who grow commodity crops are not growing gardens. Right? You find people who are leasing their land for commodity crops, they don't grow a garden. So they lease their land to somebody to grow corn, wheat, soy, and then they go to the store and shop. Then they're going to be sick. That's when people decide, oh, I want to do it a different way. But how can I make money doing it this way? You can't. Not that you can't make money farming organically, but you can't make money from the time you're trying to change over a toxic system into an organic system. That's going to take, depending on what you did, 3 to 10 years. So you might as well start with a garden rather than start with a farm. Is this making sense? Start at the size you can manage. Because once you start big, that's a big footprint to deal with. What does it take to manage a large space? Huh. So those two, time, resources, energy.
Mhm.
Energy. So right now, the BRICS nations are getting together, right?
Big ski.
Right? BRICS, what does it stand for?
Brazil,
Brazil,
Russia,
Russia,
India,
India,
China,
China,
South Africa.
South Africa. They're getting together because they're tired of having to buy money to buy energy.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Who wants to have to buy money to buy energy? If you got the money, you want to buy the energy. That's what you need is the energy. But if you first have to buy US dollars so that you can then go buy oil, and I tell you your peso is only worth this much compared to my dollar, then I'm losing money at every spot. So when you think about a large space, can you create time? Isn't time passing the same right now for you and me and you? Right now, the time is passing the same. It don't pass faster for you or me. It's the same. So you can't get more time. Resources, that's a hard one to judge because some people look at money and call it a resource. Some people look at the soil. Some people look at the seeds. But it's always going to require energy. You got to power everything you're doing. And if your energy cannot be increased based on what you're growing, then you're getting into a bad situation. What can you grow to generate energy? Corn. What else can you grow to generate energy? Okay, let me go back to this. When she said corn, what did you mean when you said corn?
Well, because I know all the gasoline now you mix with ethanol. Ethanol, corn to produce ethanol.
And ethanol is a alcohol, right? So, essentially, anything that you can ferment, potatoes, rotten fruit, right? The other thing you can do is if you have a hot enough compost pile, you take copper tubing, copper piping, and you run it through the bottom of your compost pile and run water through there and it will heat that water up. Passive energy, because your compost piles are generating heat already. So, I'm going to wrap it up. So remember, your spaces, you want to do them start with a human level of design. Do a resource audit of yourself before you jump into it. What do I already have? You see all that cardboard over there? That's a useful resource, right? Why is that useful? Useful for sheep mulching, right? Useful for growing earthworms. Useful for burning if you need to, for creating biochar, right? So you do a resource audit. What do I already have? How much space do I need? So that is based on how many people you're trying to feed, right? You're living in Florida, you should be able to supply 30% of your household food. Aim at 30%. Don't think, oh, we're just going to only eat out of the garden. That's unrealistic.
Yeah.
But just say, let me aim at 30%. You're not going to be growing your rice. You're not going to be growing your wheat. You're not going to be growing your dried beans and garbanzos. So be realistic with yourself. And then plant a fruit tree for every child that you got. Every time an ancestor, an elder passes, you plant a fruit tree. Different birthdays, you plant fruit trees. When somebody has a baby, you plant the fruit tree. You understand? Get into the habit. Every Earth Day, plant a fruit tree. Right? Because the fruit stays in the ground longer than the vegetables, so it's going to have more nutrients in it, and it demands less care. To get a successful pepper plant, you got to baby it. You put an avocado in the ground, you treat it good for a couple years, it's going to set itself in, it's going to go get the microorganisms from the subsoil. You will always get more nutrients from fruits than vegetables. Set yourself up right. And then, market. If you're going to the market, grow as many dark vegetables as you can. If there's a dark variety of green beans, like the purple velour, grow the purple velour, right? If there's a dark variety of a tomato, like the Cherokee Black, grow the Cherokee Black, right? You want to grow the things that people aren't going to have at every table. You don't want everybody to, look, grow a special kind of cucumber, grow a special kind of eggplant. This is the thing that's going to bring people to the market. And focus on growing herbs. These are quick. Everyone always wants them. Parsley, cilantro, dill, celery, garlic, onions, potatoes. Every culture uses them. There's nobody who doesn't use garlic. There's nobody who doesn't use onions. You see what I mean? You don't want to get into these niches and stuff. You want to get to where there's certain things that everybody needs. I plant those. Garlic. Get your I don't know here, but in Atlanta, you get your garlic in by Thanksgiving. If you get your garlic in by Thanksgiving, that was the only thing that went through this hard freeze that we had. I'm pulling garlic and taking it to the chefs right now. They're loving it. Get your garlic in, leave it in. It's a 5 or 6 month crop. Put it in a place, let it hold. Leeks, garlic, onions, your alliums. You're going to market. Presentation is key. Not only presentation of the food, but presentation of you. You understand? People are picky. They don't want to buy from somebody who's frowning. They don't want to buy from somebody who's on their phone. They don't want to buy from somebody whose clothes ain't right. Whether you think it's right or not, that's how it is. Be knowledgeable about the food. Be able to answer questions. We used to do samples at every market, and then COVID happened. And the last thing to think about is making sure that you are studying. Get the resources that you need. Feel free to check me out. Our information is here. Grow Where You Are. You can keep that. And the book is available today, 20. Yes, sir. And I hope this has been worthwhile. If you have any questions, I know we already exceeded time. If you have any questions, I'm here for it. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll get it.
I guess my information is